Denise Whitfield was 34 years old when she spent 14 hours cooking for the 100 guests celebrating her husband's partnership at the same private equity firm she'd secretly helped fund. Desmond stood at the head of the table, glass raised, thanking everyone who'd made this night possible. Everyone except her. When she pulled out her chair to sit for the toast, Desmond looked at her like she'd made a mistake. "Servants don't sit with us," he said, loud enough for all 100 guests to hear. But Denise wasn't looking at Desmond anymore. She was looking at his phone, lit up on the table beside her purse, a text from his colleague Vanessa glowing on the screen. "Almost done playing house? I'm waiting." Desmond had no idea his wife had just seen it. He had no idea what she owned, what she'd signed, or what she was capable of. He simply smiled at the room, waiting for applause. What happened in the next 60 seconds for the rest of his life. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe because today is even more intense. The kitchen smelled like garlic and brown butter at 6 in the morning. Denise Whitfield stood at the center island in her own home, her apron already dusted with flour, her hands moving with the kind of quiet certainty that only comes from years of practice. She had been awake since 5. The grocery delivery had arrived at 5:30. By the time the sun cleared the back fence and spilled gold across the tile floor, she had already broken down 4 whole chickens, trimmed 2 pounds of green beans, and started a stock that would simmer low and slow for the next 3 hours. 100 guests, 10 tables, 5 courses. Her event sheet was clipped to the cabinet above the stove, laminated, color-coded, timed down to the minute. She had written it herself, the way she wrote all of them. The handwriting was neat and even, like everything else she did. This was her work. This was what she was good at. Whitfield and Grace Catering had started in a rented church kitchen 8 years ago, built from the $40,000 her father left her when his heart finally gave out on a Tuesday morning in March. He had been a quiet man, a careful man, the kind of father who kept his insurance policy updated and told his daughter she had a good head on her shoulders every chance he got. Denise had taken that money and turned it into something real, a licensed company, a small, loyal staff, a reputation in the city for food that tasted like someone actually cared. She had named it Whitfield and Grace, her last name, and her father's middle name. His name lived in every event she ran. Tonight was no different, except that tonight the event was in her own dining room. Her staff arrived at 8. Yolanda came first, as she always did, pushing through the back door with a coffee in each hand and her locks pinned up under a clean cap. She was 41, loud in the best way, and had been Denise's head chef and closest friend since the beginning. "Tell me you didn't start the stock without me," Yolanda said, looking at the pot on the stove. 3 hours ago, Denise said. Yolanda set down the coffees and pressed the back of her hand to the lid like a doctor taking a pulse. She nodded slowly. "Okay, that's fine. That's actually fine," Denise smiled. "I know." The rest of the crew filtered in over the next 20 minutes. Marcus on station, who was fast with a knife and never complained. Lena, who handled dessert plating with a precision that still amazed Denise every time she watched. 2 servers Denise had used a dozen times before, reliable and professional. She gathered them in the kitchen before the work got loud. "Tonight is a big table," she said, keeping her voice calm and even. "Important people. 5 courses going out on a tight clock. I want every plate clean, every time, every course. We work the way we always work." She paused. "Any questions?" Nobody had any. Good. By noon, the dining room was transformed. Denise had done the table design herself the night before. Ivory linens pressed flat, low candle arrangements in dark glass, each place setting measured to the inch. It looked expensive without trying too hard. It looked like the kind of table you remembered. Desmond came downstairs at 12:30 in a fresh shirt, looked over the room, and nodded like he was approving a report. "Looks good," he said. "Thank you," Denise said. She was carrying a folded linen and did not stop walking. He straightened one of the centerpieces that didn't need straightening. "Ashby's bringing his wife. Don't overwhelm them with the food talk, okay? These aren't catering people." Denise kept her eyes on the table. "I'll keep that in mind." He nodded again and went back upstairs. Patrice arrived at 2 o'clock, a full hour earlier than anyone else, in a cream blazer with her silver hair pinned back like a crown. She walked through the front door without knocking, the way she always did, and moved through the downstairs rooms with slow, deliberate steps, her eyes taking in everything. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. Denise was reducing a pan sauce at the back burner. Yolanda was at the prep table, working quietly. "Well," Patrice said, folding her hands in front of her, "you're actually in an apron." "Hello, Patrice," Denise said, not turning around. "I'm just saying." Patrice's voice was pleasant, the way a knife is pleasant before it moves. "It's nice to see you earning your keep for once. Desmond's worked so hard for this." Yolanda went very still at the prep table. Denise turned down the flame on the burner, slowly, deliberately. She turned and looked at her mother-in-law with a steady, level expression. "Everything's on schedule," she said. Patrice smiled, satisfied, and went to find somewhere else to stand. Yolanda waited until the sound of heels faded down the hall. Then she looked at Denise. Denise had already turned back to the stove. Guests began arriving at 6. They came in pairs and small groups, filling the downstairs with the low hum of professional conversation. Denise watched them from the kitchen doorway for a moment. The tailored jackets, the careful laughter, the way everyone in the room seemed to be performing slightly for everyone else. Desmond moved through the crowd with his shoulders back and his smile wide. He was good at this part, always had been. She watched a colleague approach him near the front hall, gesturing toward the dining room. "Your wife put this together?" "My wife does the food," Desmond said, easy and smooth, his hand already moving to guide the conversation somewhere else. "She handles the catering side of things." Denise stepped back into the kitchen. She picked up her ladle and went back to work. Harold Ashby arrived at 6:15. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with close-cropped gray hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had spent decades being the most important person in any room without needing to announce it. He shook Desmond's hand with genuine warmth, kissed the cheek of someone's wife, and accepted a glass of water instead of wine. Denise noticed that. She noticed most things. Vanessa Odom arrived 5 minutes behind him, in a deep green dress that fit like it had been made for her specifically. She was 29, composed, and beautiful in the sharp, deliberate way of someone who understood exactly what they looked like. She moved through the room with easy confidence, greeting people by name, laughing at the right moments. She found Desmond inside of 4 minutes. She stood close to him. Not in a way that would photograph badly, just close enough that it registered. A half step inside the distance that colleagues kept. Desmond laughed at something she said, and touched the small of her back to guide her toward the bar, quick and natural, like it was something his hand already knew how to do. Denise watched from the kitchen doorway for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned back to her kitchen, and she finished plating the final course. At 7:45, the last plate was set. Every dish was perfect. The sauce was exactly right. The garnish was clean and precise. 100 plates lined up in the kitchen like a quiet kind of proof. Denise untied her apron and folded it over the back of a chair. She washed her hands, dried them, and smoothed the front of the navy dress she had changed into during the brief window between courses. She had planned for this window. She had planned for all of it. From the dining room, she could hear Desmond's voice rising above the crowd, warm and carrying, working toward a toast. She took one breath. Then she walked out of the kitchen and moved through the room toward the head table, where her seat was waiting. The dining room was full and warm, lit by the low glow of the candles Denise had placed herself. 100 people sat at tables draped in ivory linen, glasses in hand, voices settling into the comfortable quiet that comes just before a toast. The silverware caught the candlelight. The centerpieces sat exactly where she had put them. It looked exactly the way she had planned it to look. Desmond stood at the head of the long main table, his glass raised, his smile relaxed and easy. He was in his element here, always was. The jacket fit him well. His posture was confident, without being stiff. He looked like a man who had earned everything in the room. Denise moved through the last few steps toward the head table, unhurried. She had done her work. 100 perfect plates, 5 courses on time without a single mistake. Now she was going to sit down. She pulled out her chair. Desmond stopped mid-sentence. The silence came fast. The kind of silence that spreads from a single point and swallows everything around it. "Servants don't sit with us." He said it clearly, pleasantly even, the way a man says something he considers obvious. His eyes moved over her once, the way they might move over a piece of furniture that had been left in the wrong place. Then he looked back at his guests with a small, composed smile, as if to say, "Nothing to worry about, just a small correction." Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. 100 people sat perfectly still, glasses hovering, and the room held that particular kind of silence that meant everyone heard it, and no one knew what to do with it. Denise did not move either. She stood with one hand on the back of the chair, her fingers resting lightly on the wood. Her face was still. Not frozen. Still. The way a person goes still when their body is making a decision their mouth isn't ready for yet. Harold Ashby sat 3 seats down. She did not look at him. She didn't need to. Then something caught her eye. Desmond's phone was on the table, face up, sitting just beside her small evening purse. It had been there all evening. She had noticed it earlier without thinking anything of it. But now the screen was lit. A text. From a name she recognized. Vanessa. The message sat there, bright and clear against the dark screen. "Almost done playing house? I'm waiting." Denise read it once, then she read it again. Not because she was confused. She understood it perfectly the first time. She read it a second time the way you press a bruise, not to make it worse, but to be absolutely certain of what you're feeling. She looked up. Desmond was still smiling, still holding his glass. His eyes were on the far end of the table where one of his colleagues had just said something. He had not looked down at his phone. He did not know she had seen it. He looked exactly like a man without a single thing to hide. And something in Denise shifted. Not loudly. There was no sharp feeling, no sudden heat behind her eyes. It was quieter than that and more final. Like a lock turning over slowly in a door that had been drifting open for a long time. A small, clean click. She let go of the chair. Her hand dropped to her side without any drama. She took one small step back from the table, smoothed the front of her dress with both hands, and when she looked up again, her face was composed and warm and entirely unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was even, polite even. She looked at no one in particular, just the general middle distance of the room, the way a professional does when addressing a crowd. "I just need to go check on dessert." A small, gracious smile. "Everything's on schedule, I promise." A few guests gave her the kind of relieved smile that people give when an uncomfortable moment finds its exit. Someone near the back of the room let out a breath. Desmond was already turning back to his toast, satisfied, glass rising again. He didn't watch her go. She walked back through the dining room at an even pace, past the tables, past the guests who were already refocusing on Desmond's voice beginning to rise again behind her, past Patrice, who sat near the side wall with her hands folded and her expression entirely unbothered. Denise pushed open the kitchen door. Yolanda looked up from the dessert station. Denise let the door swing shut behind her. The noise of the dining room became muffled, reduced, far away. She stood for a moment in the middle of her kitchen, under the clean white light, surrounded by the quiet order of trays and equipment and the work of her own hands. Her hands were steady. She looked at the dessert cart, loaded and ready, every plate precisely arranged. Then she looked at Yolanda. Yolanda looked at her for exactly 1 second. That was all it took. She had known Denise for 11 years. She didn't need an explanation. She could read it in the set of Denise's jaw, in the way she was standing just a little too still, in the careful, controlled blankness of her face that meant something had happened that Denise was not yet ready to say out loud. Yolanda set down her spatula. "Pack it," Denise said. Her voice was quiet, level, the kind of quiet that isn't soft at all. "Everything?" "Everything they haven't touched. Every tray, every chafing dish, the dessert cart, the bread baskets, all of it." Denise moved to the far counter and picked up a stack of transport containers without rushing. "Box it clean. I don't want anything left." Yolanda didn't ask why. She turned to the 2 line staff working the dessert station and said, low and firm, "You heard her. Let's go." They moved. The kitchen became something efficient and quiet and purposeful. Trays were lifted from warming racks and sealed into transport containers. The dessert cart was wheeled toward the back service entrance. Chafing dishes were closed and stacked. The staff worked without talking, reading the room the way good professionals always do. Quickly, without drama, and without asking questions they could see weren't going to be answered right now. Denise worked alongside them. She didn't stand back and direct. She lifted and sealed and stacked with the rest of them, her hands moving steadily through each task. And if those hands weren't entirely steady, if there was the faintest tremor running through her fingers when she pressed the lid onto a container, she kept moving anyway. Within 10 minutes, the back of the catering van was half full. She left Yolanda running the rest. She pushed back through the kitchen door into the dining room. The change was immediate. Out here, the candles still burned low and warm. Desmond was mid-sentence in his toast, his glass raised again, his voice finding its comfortable rhythm. Guests had settled. The moment from earlier had softened at the edges the way uncomfortable moments do when nobody acknowledges them directly. Denise walked to the center of the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'm so sorry to interrupt." The warmth in her tone was genuine and professional and completely controlled. Heads turned. Desmond paused. "I want to thank each of you for being here this evening. It's been a privilege to serve you tonight." She let her eyes move naturally across the room, unhurried, and when she found Harold Ashby's face, she held it for just a moment. "Mr. Ashby, thank you especially for coming. It means a great deal." Ashby's expression was careful. He was watching her the way someone watches a situation they are still trying to understand. "Unfortunately, due to a contract matter, Whitfield and Grace's service this evening has concluded early." Another warm smile, brief and composed, directed at the room. "I hope you've all enjoyed the food." The silence was total. Desmond lowered his glass. "Denise?" His voice had dropped. There was a warning in it, wrapped in something that was trying very hard to sound like calm. "What are you doing?" She was already turning toward the front of the room. "Denise!" Louder now. The composed smile was gone. "Denise, stop! What is this? What does that mean, concluded early? These are my guests!" She didn't stop. She walked through the dining room at the same even pace she had used all night, past the ivory tablecloths, past the centerpieces, past 100 people sitting in perfect silence with their empty dessert spaces and their full water glasses, and their expressions that ranged from confused to stunned to something that looked, on a few faces, like quiet recognition. She pushed through the front door. The night air hit her, cool, still. Behind her, she could hear Desmond's voice rising, trying to find purchase, trying to recapture something that had already left the building. She heard the murmur of guests beginning to talk at once, the low wave of it building as the door swung shut. The last 2 staff members were loading the final trays into the van. Yolanda stood at the back, watching Denise come down the front walk. She didn't say anything. She just closed the van doors with a solid, final sound and held out Denise's car keys. Denise took them. She got in her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment, both hands on the wheel, looking at the front of the house, her house, the lit windows, the shadows of people moving inside, the faint sound of Desmond's voice still trying to explain something to someone. She put the car in drive and pulled away. She made it 2 blocks before her hands started shaking, not a little. The trembling moved up through her wrists and into her forearms, and she had to grip the wheel harder to keep the car straight. She pulled her phone from her purse. She found the contact and pressed call. It rang twice. "Hey." Reggie's voice was calm, familiar, the same voice that had talked her through every hard thing since she was 9 years old. Denise stared at the dark road ahead. "I need everything you have on Desmond," she said. "Tonight." Reggie's house was a 20-minute drive from theirs. Denise didn't remember most of it. She remembered the traffic light at Dunmore and 5th that caught her twice. She remembered the radio coming on by accident when she bumped the dial, some late-night gospel station, and her reaching over immediately and shutting it off. She remembered turning onto his street and seeing the light already on in his kitchen window, warm and steady in the dark. She parked in his driveway and sat there for a moment. She was still wearing her work clothes, black blouse, black slacks, the non-slip shoes she always wore during service. Her catering uniform, basically. The clothes she had put on at 5:30 that morning to go cook for 100 people in her own home. She got out of the car. Reggie opened the front door before she reached the porch steps. He was in a gray sweatshirt and reading glasses, and he looked at her the way he always looked at her when something was wrong. Steady, taking inventory, not performing concern, just checking. "You eat anything?" he said. "No." "Come in." His kitchen table was already covered. His laptop was open, a yellow legal pad beside it with writing on 3/4 of the first page, 2 different colored pens, a manila folder, a coffee mug. He had been working since she called. Denise sat down in the chair across from the laptop. She looked at the screen. It was a state business filing. The name Whitfield and Grace Catering, LLC, sat at the top of the document in plain black text. Reggie settled into his chair and turned the laptop slightly so they could both see it. "How much do you know about who's listed on your LLC paperwork?" he asked. Denise looked at him. "I'm the owner. I filed it myself 9 years ago. Used Daddy's insurance money as the startup capital. Reggie, you were there." "I know I was." He pulled the laptop closer. "Look at this." He clicked through to a second document, an amendment filing. The date in the upper right corner read 18 months ago. Her eyes moved down the page. Majority member, 60% ownership interest, Desmond A. Whitfield. She read it again. She read it a 3rd time. The words didn't change. "He amended the LLC," Reggie said. His voice was calm, factual, the voice he used when he was giving someone information they needed, even when the information was terrible. "Filed an ownership restructuring, made himself the majority member, dropped your stake to 40%. Denise's jaw tightened. "I never signed anything like that." "You signed a power of attorney about 19 months ago." He flipped open the manila folder and slid a copy across the table toward her. "This one. Do you remember it?" She looked at the document. The signature at the bottom was hers. She recognized it immediately. The particular way she signed her full name, the slight leftward lean to the D. She remembered signing it. She had been in the house, still moving slowly, still sore, 6 weeks out from surgery. Her hysterectomy had been harder than the doctors predicted, the recovery longer. She'd been back in bed more days than not, and there had been so much paperwork that month, or what had felt like paperwork. Tax forms, insurance documents, things Desmond kept bringing to her with a pen and a patient expression, telling her it was just routine, just housekeeping, it just needed her signature to process correctly. Just for taxes, he'd said. The accountant needs it to file properly this year. She'd signed it in bed. She'd been too tired to read the full document, and she had trusted him. She put the paper back down on the table, slowly, carefully. "He used it to restructure the company," she said. "Yes." "While I was recovering?" "Yes." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside a car passed, its headlights sweeping briefly across the window. Denise thought about her father. about the year after his funeral, the way she had moved through grief with something to build, the menu development, the equipment she'd sourced piece by piece, the business name she had chosen herself, Whitfield and Grace, her last name and his middle name. She had kept both because she couldn't bring herself to let either go. She had built that company from the money he left her when he died, from nothing else, from her own hands and his memory. Desmond had been in that LLC paperwork for 18 months, quietly, while she ran every event, managed every client, trained every staff member, cooked in his mother's kitchen at Christmas, and called it a favor. She breathed in through her nose. "You said this is just the surface," she said. Reggie nodded. "This is the part that took me an hour. I haven't touched his personal finances yet. I haven't started on the woman." Vanessa. The text still sitting on Desmond's phone screen. "Almost done playing house?" "Then dig deeper," Denise said. "All of it. The money, her, everything. I don't care how long it takes." Reggie picked up his pen. "All right." She looked once at the amendment document still sitting on the table. Then she turned it face down so she didn't have to look at Desmond's name anymore. "I'm not going home tonight," she said. Reggie was already writing. "Guest room's made up," he said. "It always is." The next 2 days, Denise worked. That was the only way she knew how to get through something. She moved, she planned, she kept her hands busy and her face still. Monday, she ran a corporate lunch for 40 at a law firm downtown. Tuesday, she managed a memorial reception in the afternoon and a rehearsal dinner in the evening. She drove between events, directed her staff, checked temperatures on the chafing dishes, tasted everything before it left the kitchen. She smiled at clients. She gave Yolanda notes on the plating for the salmon. She did everything she always did. Nobody who saw her would have known. She went back to Reggie's Tuesday night. He was sitting at the kitchen table when she came in, same yellow legal pad, same manila folder. But the folder was thicker now, and there was a second one beside it. He looked up when she walked in. He didn't ask how she was. He knew she didn't want that right now. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He opened the first folder. The affair had started 14 months ago. Reggie laid it out plainly, the way he always did. Dates, amounts, documented facts, no extra words. His handwriting covered 2 full pages of the legal pad. He had cross-referenced credit card statements he'd obtained through a contact, receipts from restaurant bookings made under Desmond's firm email, and a joint business account attached to a consulting side venture Desmond had filed 18 months ago, around the same time he'd restructured the LLC. That account had received transfers from Whitfield and Grace's operating fund. Small amounts, irregular enough to look like normal business expenses. 300 here, 400 there. But over 14 months, it added up. Reggie slid the page toward her. "He ran the dinners through a business account," Reggie said. "Dinners, hotel stays twice, a weekend in Charlotte in March. Paid for partially with money that moved from your catering operating fund into that side account." Denise looked at the numbers. She didn't touch the paper. "He used my business to pay for her," she said. "Some of it, yes." She let that sit there. She didn't say anything else about it. She filed it away in the same quiet place she had been storing everything since Saturday night, the place that was running out of room. "Patrice," she said. Reggie nodded and turned to the second page. "She's known since at least March, possibly earlier." He had a printed screenshot, a text exchange recovered through a contact. She didn't ask how. The messages were between Desmond and his mother. Denise read the first exchange. "She's been asking questions," Desmond had written. Patrice's response, "Then keep her busy with the business. She'll focus on that. Just don't get sloppy." 3 messages down. She mentioned the account again. "Patrice, tell her it's a tax thing. She trusts you on paperwork. Use that." Denise set the page down. She thought about every Sunday dinner at Patrice's house, every time the woman had stood in her kitchen while Denise cooked a full meal for the family, offering opinions on the seasoning, making small comments about how Denise still hadn't learned to delegate. The way she'd said, just this past Saturday, that Denise was finally earning her keep, while knowing all of it. "Okay," Denise said. Her voice was steady. What's in the second folder? Reggie opened it. This is about Vanessa Odom, he said, and it's separate from Desmond. He explained it carefully. Vanessa was on the junior partnership track at Desmond's firm. She and another junior analyst, a woman named Keisha Moore, had both been up for a senior analyst promotion earlier in the year. Keisha had the stronger performance numbers. She was also, Reggie had confirmed, a friend of someone in the firm's administrative staff who had noticed something wrong. Vanessa had been submitting reports to Harold Ashby's office, performance summaries, client outcome analysis, that had been selectively edited, numbers adjusted, context removed. On paper, Keisha's results looked inconsistent, incomplete, like someone who wasn't quite ready. Reggie had obtained the original unedited versions of 3 of those reports through the admin contact. He laid the 2 sets side by side on the table. Denise looked at them. She compared the numbers herself. She was a business owner. She knew how to read a financial document. The differences were not subtle once you knew to look. She didn't just take up with my husband, Denise said slowly. No, Reggie said. She's been running her own play the whole time. Desmond is part of it, but she's been working on her own lane, too. Denise sat back in her chair. She thought about everything on the table in front of her. The affair, her money funding it, Patrice coaching her son on how to manage her like a problem, and Vanessa sitting across town, quietly dismantling a colleague's career so she could step into the space. Nobody had thought Denise would find out. Nobody had thought she was paying close enough attention. That was their mistake. Reggie, she said. Yeah? Before I decide anything, I need to know exactly how much money Desmond has taken. All of it. Every account, every transfer, every dollar with my name on it somewhere that ended up somewhere else. Reggie picked up his pen. Give me 48 hours, he said. The call came at 9:14 Wednesday morning. Denise was standing at the prep counter in her commercial kitchen, elbow deep in a tray of raw chicken thighs she was breaking down for a Thursday corporate event. Yolanda was behind her at the stove, reducing a pan of stock, humming something low and off-key. 2 line workers were dicing vegetables at the far counter. Her phone buzzed against the stainless steel surface. Reggie. She stripped off her glove and answered. You need to come, he said. No greeting. I'm mid-prep on a 40-person order. I know. Come anyway. She recognized his tone. She had heard it once before, the night he'd called to tell her their father had collapsed at work. That flat, careful voice that meant he was holding something back until he could say it to her face. Give me 20 minutes, she said. She pulled off her apron. She told Yolanda she had an errand, that she needed her to oversee the rest of the breakdown, that the chicken needed to be portioned and chilled before noon. Yolanda looked at her. Just looked, the way she always did when she sensed something was wrong and knew better than to ask. I got it, Yolanda said. Go. Reggie was at the kitchen table again. The legal pad was pushed to the side this time. What was in front of him were printed documents, several pages, stapled in 2 separate sets. He had his reading glasses on, which he only wore when he'd been staring at small print for a long time. He didn't wait for her to sit down. The $150,000 your father left you, he said. Denise pulled out the chair and sat slowly. What about it? You told me 3 years ago you let Desmond invest it, that he said he'd found a good vehicle for it, something through the firm. He said it was a portfolio investment, that we'd see returns in 5 years. She paused. He handled all of it. I signed what he put in front of me. Reggie took off his glasses and set them on the table. It wasn't a portfolio investment, he said. It was a personal capital contribution. He deposited that money directly into the firm as his own private stake, the kind of commitment the senior partners require before they'll consider someone for full partnership. He slid the first set of documents toward her. That's the contribution record. $150,000. Desmond Whitfield. No other names. Denise picked up the pages. She read the way she always read financial documents. Carefully, from the top, not skipping anything. Her father had taught her that. Read everything. Sign nothing you don't understand. She had tried to live by that rule. She had believed, for a long time, that she did. Her name was not on a single line, not as co-contributor, not as source of funds, not anywhere. She turned to the second page, the third. She looked at the date of the contribution. She looked at the amount. She looked at the account it had been wired from, an investment account in Desmond's name alone, one she hadn't known existed, funded by a transfer from a joint savings account 14 days after her hysterectomy, when she had been home in bed and Desmond had been handling everything. She set the papers down. "Harold Ashby thinks Desmond put that money in himself," she said. "Yes. He thinks Desmond built that stake on his own. That's what the paperwork shows." She sat very still. Outside, a truck rumbled down Reggie's street. A dog barked twice and went quiet. She thought about her father, Earl Combs, a man who had worked 31 years as a building inspector, who had driven the same truck for a decade, who had carried a folded paper bag lunch to work every single day because he was saving for something, though he never told any of them what. She had found out after he died that the something had been her, a policy he'd quietly maintained for 20 years because he wanted to make sure she'd have a foundation if she ever needed to build one. She had used it to build Whitfield and Grace, and then she had handed $150,000 of what remained to her husband, because he had asked her to, because she had trusted him, because she had been lying in a hospital bed and didn't have the energy to ask the right questions. That money had bought Desmond his partnership bid, his celebration, his table full of guests, his moment with Harold Ashby and the glass raised and the toast, while her name sat nowhere. The anger she felt wasn't loud. It didn't spike or surge. It settled, down through her chest into something low and solid, like a weight finding the bottom of still water. It had been building in layers since Saturday night, and now it was simply done moving. It was just there, cold and certain and very, very clear. "I'm done reacting," she said. Reggie watched her. "Everything I've done since Saturday, leaving the party, coming here, waiting, that was still reacting." She folded her hands on the table. "I want to plan something he won't see coming, something none of them will see coming." Reggie leaned back in his chair. "What do you have in mind?" he said. Denise looked at him steadily. "One more dinner," she said, "on my terms." Denise waited until after lunch to call him, not because she needed more time to prepare. She was already prepared. She waited because she wanted to be at her own kitchen when she did it, standing on her own floor, surrounded by her own equipment, her staff moving around her in the way they always did. She wanted to feel like herself when she heard his voice. She stepped outside to the loading dock and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Denise?" His voice was careful, measured, the voice of a man who had been rehearsing. "Desmond," she said. A short pause. "I've been wanting to talk to you about Saturday. What happened? It came out wrong. I didn't mean it the way it sounded." She let him finish. She didn't argue. She didn't agree. "I want to make things right," she said. "I've been thinking about it. You worked hard for this partnership. That deserves a real celebration, one that doesn't end the way Saturday did." She kept her voice even, almost gentle. "Let me do a proper dinner, something smaller, intentional, a chance to leave people with a better impression." Another pause, shorter this time. "You'd cater it?" he said. "Personally." She could hear him thinking. She could almost hear the exact shape of what he was thinking. Harold Ashby's face across the table on Saturday, the empty dining room, the murmuring guests, the damage he still needed to contain. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, that would be good. I think that's exactly what we need." His voice warmed up quickly, the way it always did when something was going his way. "I'll handle the guest list. Keep it tight. Maybe 15 people." "Make sure Mr. Ashby is on it," she said. "Of course." A beat. "Denise, I really am sorry about what I said." "I know," she said. She went back inside. She called Harold Ashby herself the following morning. She had gotten his direct number from the firm's website, his assistant's line, and she was transferred to him within 4 minutes, which told her he had either been curious enough to take her call or had enough respect for her name on the event contract to make time. "Mrs. Whitfield?" he said. His voice was unhurried, deliberate, the voice of a man who had spent decades deciding what was worth his attention and what wasn't. "Mr. Ashby, thank you for taking my call." She stood at her kitchen island, notepad in front of her, pen in hand. "I'm reaching out about a follow-up dinner for my husband's partnership, something smaller and more personal than Saturday evening. I wanted to make sure you'd be included." A brief pause. "I appreciate that," he said. "Saturday was eventful." "It was," she said simply. "I'd like to do better by you." There was something in the silence that followed that she couldn't fully name. Not suspicion, more like attention, the kind a man gives when he's noticed something he hasn't figured out yet. "I'll be there," he said. Reggie had the full documentation package assembled by Thursday evening. He spread everything across his kitchen table in 3 separate groups, each clipped together and labeled in his small, precise handwriting, the kind of handwriting she remembered from when he used to leave notes on the fridge for their mother before school. The first group was the LLC paperwork, the original filings from when Denise had incorporated Whitfield and Grace using their father's insurance money. Beside it, the amended filing from 18 months ago, Desmond's name listed as majority owner, executed under the power of attorney she had signed in a hospital bed. And beside that, the new filing. Denise's attorney had completed the reclamation paperwork 2 days earlier. Fraudulent power of attorney, improperly executed, signed under misrepresentation of purpose. A judge had reviewed it. It was done. Whitfield and Grace Catering was hers again, fully and solely, as of Tuesday afternoon. Desmond didn't know yet. The second group was the investment record, the $150,000 capital contribution under Desmond's name alone, the wire transfer from the joint savings account, the timing, 14 days after her surgery, her attorney's memo connecting the source funds to her inheritance directly with bank statements attached. The third group was Vanessa's. Reggie had been thorough. He had pulled the original unedited performance reports on the junior colleague Vanessa had targeted, a woman named Carla Sims, who worked in the firm's administrative department and had been quietly sidelined over the past 6 months. Beside those reports were the edited versions that had been routed to Ashby's office. Figures changed, deadlines misrepresented, the kind of small alterations that took a passing review and turned it into a case for removal. Reggie had also documented where the altered files had originated, tracing them back through a shared internal system to Vanessa's login credentials. Denise went through all of it slowly. She read every page the way her father had taught her. She didn't skip anything. When she finished, she stacked all 3 sets back together, neatly, and closed the folder. She set her hands flat on top of it. The dinner was tomorrow. The guests arrived at 7. Denise had been there since noon. She had spent the afternoon the way she always did before a big service, checking temperatures, tasting each dish twice, adjusting the seasoning on the braised short ribs until they were exactly right. She had arranged the table herself, placing each setting by hand. White linens, good china, the kind of table that said someone cared enough to do it properly. Yolanda moved beside her in the kitchen, quieter than usual, reading the room the way she always could. "You good?" Yolanda asked at one point, sliding a pan off the burner. "I'm good," Denise said. Yolanda nodded once and didn't ask again. Desmond had dressed carefully. She could tell by the way he moved through the house when he came downstairs. Jacket pressed, shoes polished, the particular kind of ease that wasn't really ease at all, but performance. He kissed her on the cheek in the kitchen, a gesture so practiced it barely registered. "Everything looks great," he said, scanning the dining room through the pass-through. "Really great, Denise." "Thank you," she said. He straightened his cuffs. "Ashby should be here by 7:15. I want to make sure the first impression is different from Saturday." "It will be," she said. He smiled at that. He heard what he wanted to hear. He always had. Harold Ashby arrived at 7:12, exactly when she expected him to. He was a compact man with silver at his temples and careful eyes that moved across a room slowly, like he was reading something. He shook Desmond's hand at the door, nodded to the other guests already seated, and then found Denise near the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said. "Mr. Ashby?" She extended her hand. "I'm glad you came." He shook it and held her gaze for just a moment longer than was polite. "So am I," he said. Dinner went smoothly. She made sure of it. The short ribs came out perfect, the roasted vegetables, the warm rolls, the wine poured at the right time into the right glasses. Denise moved between the kitchen and the dining room with the same calm authority she brought to every service, directing her staff with small gestures and quiet words. The table filled with conversation. Desmond laughed too loudly at his own stories. Vanessa, seated 3 chairs down from him, smiled at all the right moments and kept her posture very straight. Denise watched her. Vanessa was dressed beautifully. A deep burgundy dress, understated earrings, the kind of woman who had planned an entrance even to a dinner she pretended to attend casually. She had spoken warmly to Ashby when he arrived and had said nothing directly to Denise. That was fine. There was nothing she needed to say yet. When the last plate had been cleared, Denise went to the kitchen. She washed her hands. She dried them. She took the folder from the shelf under the prep table where she had placed it that morning. She held it at her side, loose and easy, and she walked back out into the dining room. Desmond was already on his feet, wine glass raised, beginning to speak. She didn't wait for him to finish. She pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, not beside him, not across from him, at the head. Her table, her house, her money in the walls and the floors and the business cards in the drawer. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when something has shifted and no one is sure yet what it means. Desmond looked at her. His smile didn't fall immediately, but it flickered. "Denise, I'll just be a minute," she said pleasantly. She set the folder on the table in front of Harold Ashby. "Mrs. Whitfield," Ashby said slowly, "there are 3 things in that first section," she said. "The original incorporation documents for Whitfield and Grace Catering, which I built using my late father's insurance money. The amended filing from 18 months ago, which moved majority ownership to my husband using a power of attorney I signed while recovering from surgery, under the understanding it was for tax purposes only." She paused. "And the corrected filing, completed Tuesday, restoring full ownership to me. The amendment was fraudulent. A judge agreed." She opened the folder herself and turned it toward him. The papers were clean, organized, labeled in Reggie's small handwriting. Ashby looked down. He didn't speak. "The second section documents $150,000 from my personal inheritance, wired into a joint account and then transferred as a capital contribution under my husband's name alone." She kept her voice level. "His name, not mine. That contribution is what secured his partnership bid with your firm." Desmond's chair scraped back. "That is not—" He stopped, started again. "That is completely misrepresenting what happened. Ashby, I can explain." "Sit down, Desmond," Ashby said. He said it the way men like him said things, without raising his voice, without anger. Just a flat, final weight behind the words. Desmond sat. Ashby turned back to the documents. He read carefully. He turned a page, then another. Denise reached into the folder and produced the second set of papers, sliding them across the table. "The last section is about Vanessa Odom," she said. She didn't look at Vanessa. She didn't need to. She could feel the stillness that had come over that end of the table, the way you feel weather change before the rain arrives. "Those are the original performance reports on a colleague named Carla Sims, alongside the edited versions that were routed to your office. The alterations are marked. The source? Login credentials and timestamps from your firm's internal system are documented on the last 2 pages." Ashby was already turning to them. The room was absolutely silent. Somewhere near the kitchen, a staff member had stopped moving entirely. Vanessa's posture, so carefully composed all evening, had gone rigid. She didn't speak. She didn't protest. She simply sat with her hands flat on the table and looked at a fixed point somewhere past Denise's shoulder, and in that stillness, she confirmed everything without saying a single word. Ashby closed the folder. He set both hands on top of it. He looked at Desmond for a long moment. "The partnership conversation," he said quietly, "is over." The phone rang at 7:43 in the morning. Denise was at her kitchen, not the house, not anymore, her commercial kitchen, the one on Briar Street that smelled like coffee and garlic and the good work of her own hands. She was reviewing her orders for the week when the call came through. She looked at the screen, set down her pen, let it ring once more before she picked up. "Denise?" Desmond's voice was different. The performance was gone. What was left underneath was smaller than she expected. Raw, almost unrecognizable. "Denise, I got a letter this morning. From the firm." "Okay," she said. "They're pulling the partnership." His voice cracked on the last word, then steadied itself, like he was embarrassed even now, even with everything, to sound that way in front of her. Ashby sent it directly. It says, "Undisclosed capital fraud." Those are the actual words they used. Undisclosed capital fraud. She said nothing. "You have to understand what that does to me, to my reputation. That kind of language, Desmond." Her voice was quiet, not mean, just firm. "I'm not going to help you with this." A long pause. "I made mistakes," he said. "I know that. But everything I was building, that was for us. I was building that for us." Denise looked out the window above the prep sink. The morning light was coming in flat and white. A delivery truck was pulling around back. "You told a room full of people I was the help," she said. "At my own table, with my food on it, after using my money to buy your way into that room in the first place." He didn't answer that. "We're done," she said, and ended the call. She heard about Vanessa through Reggie, who heard it through a contact at the firm. An internal review had been opened the morning after the dinner. By Thursday, it was over. Vanessa Odom was terminated quietly, which was the firm's way of saying they wanted no noise around it. But the reason traveled the way reasons always do in small professional worlds, through assistant desks and lunch tables and the careful shorthand of people who remembered her name. She had sabotaged a colleague to clear her own path. Now that path was gone, and so was the career she had been willing to burn someone else to protect. Denise didn't feel satisfied exactly. It was smaller than that. It was just the sensation of a thing being correct, of the shape of something finally matching what it was supposed to be. The family gathering was Patrice's idea. She had called it together herself, framing it as a chance to talk things through before the situation, as she put it, gets any further out of hand. Denise arrived alone. She sat across from Desmond's aunts, his two cousins, an uncle who had driven 2 hours and seemed to already regret it. Patrice sat at the center of her own table, back straight, wearing the expression she always wore when she needed the room to believe she was the reasonable one. "I think," Patrice began, "that both sides of this need to—" "You knew," Denise said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room was already listening. "You knew about Vanessa for months. Reggie has your texts to Desmond, the ones where you told him how to keep me from asking questions." She looked at Patrice directly. "You told your son to manage me, like I was a problem to be handled." Patrice's jaw tightened. "I was trying to protect this family." "You were protecting him," Denise said. "That's different." One of the aunts, Desmond's father's sister, a quiet woman named Beverly who had always been kind to Denise at holidays, looked at Patrice with something that had not been there before. It wasn't anger. It was the slow, reluctant withdrawal of trust, the kind that doesn't come back. The cousin beside Beverly set down his coffee cup without drinking from it. Patrice opened her mouth again, then seemed to understand that the room had already moved. The explanation she had prepared wasn't going to land the way she had planned. The people around that table had just heard something true, and truth had a weight that performance couldn't balance out, no matter how straight you sat or how certain you looked. She said nothing else. Denise stood, thanked Beverly for the coffee she hadn't touched, and left. Her attorney met her at the courthouse at 11. The papers had been filed 4 days earlier, the morning after the dinner, right around the time Desmond was reading Ashby's letter for the first time. Denise had filed first. The documentation was airtight. The fraudulent power of attorney, the misappropriated inheritance, the business filing corrected under court order. Her attorney had called it one of the cleaner asset cases she'd seen in years. Today was just the confirmation, the formality of it. Denise signed where she was told to sign. She read what she was told to read. She asked 2 questions, received 2 clear answers, and shook her attorney's hand outside the glass doors when it was finished. The steps were warm in the late morning sun. She walked down them alone, got into her car, and drove back toward her kitchen. 6 months later, the kitchen on Briar Street smelled like brown butter and fresh thyme. Denise moved through it the way she always had. Steady, deliberate, eyes catching everything at once. A pan that needed rotating, a sauce that needed 1 more minute, a garnish tray that was slightly off-center on the prep table. She adjusted it without breaking stride. The kitchen was full tonight. 6 staff members, all of them in pressed black, all of them moving with the kind of quiet efficiency that only comes from working under someone who actually knows what she's doing. Yolanda was at the stove, managing 2 burners at once, her mouth running a low commentary to the line cook beside her that made the young man laugh despite himself. "Yolanda," Denise said, passing behind her. "Already on it," Yolanda said without turning around, tilting the pan just slightly to even out the heat. Denise smiled. On the board near the door, written in her own handwriting at the top of the evening's order sheet, was the contract name: Ashby and Partners, Private Dinner, Whitfield and Grace Catering, Sole Proprietor, Denise Whitfield. Her name, right there at the top, the way it should have been all along. Harold Ashby had called her personally 3 weeks after the dinner. He hadn't made a speech about it. He wasn't that kind of man. He had simply said that he needed a caterer he could trust for his firm's private events, and that he believed she was exactly that. The contract was substantial, the kind that fills a quarter of a year's calendar and opens doors to 3 more like it. She had thanked him, quoted her rate without apologizing for it, and sent the paperwork over by end of day. Her name on every page. She had heard about Desmond the way you hear about things you no longer need to chase, through a passing comment, a second-hand mention, the kind of information that arrives without fanfare because it no longer carries any weight. He was at a smaller firm now, a regional outfit in a building without a lobby worth mentioning. Someone who knew someone had run into him at a conference and said he spent most of the conversation explaining himself, his history, the circumstances, what people had misunderstood, the way people talk when they're trying to rebuild a version of their reputation from materials that no longer hold together the way they used to. The partnership was gone. The explanation was permanent. Denise thought about that for about as long as it took her to finish her morning coffee. Then she moved on. Vanessa she saw once, by accident. It was outside a building downtown, a smaller financial consulting firm, the kind of place with the logo on the door in plain block letters and no doorman. Vanessa was standing just outside the entrance in a blazer that still fit perfectly, holding a leather portfolio against her chest, her face set in the careful, composed expression of someone preparing to perform well. She was interviewing. Denise recognized the posture, the way you hold yourself when the stakes feel smaller than you'd planned for, but you still need to convince someone you belong. She had seen it before on other people, never on Vanessa. She didn't stop, didn't slow down, just kept walking, her own folder tucked under her arm, her own afternoon already full. The career Vanessa had been willing to burn a colleague to protect was gone. What was left was the work of starting over somewhere quieter, with a name that now carried the wrong kind of recognition in the circles that mattered most. That was enough. Denise didn't need more than that. That evening she set her own table. Not the event table, Not a client's rented venue with folding chairs and linen rentals. Her table. The one in her home. The house she had kept in the settlement because the paperwork had been airtight and the asset documentation had been irrefutable, and her attorney had, in fact, been exactly as good as advertised. She set 3 places, nothing elaborate. Good plates, real napkins, candles that were already burning low and warm by the time Reggie knocked and let himself in with the key she'd given him back, the one she'd taken from Desmond's ring and passed to her brother the week the divorce was finalized. Yolanda came in behind him with a bottle of wine and her outside voice, which was the only voice she owned, filling the hallway immediately with commentary about the traffic on Route 9 and whether Reggie had gotten taller or whether she had just been around short people too long. Reggie set a grocery bag on the counter and said nothing, which was his version of laughing. Denise stood at the head of the table. Her table. In her home. Her name on the deed, her name on the business, her name on the contract, sitting in a folder on the kitchen counter that would generate more revenue next quarter than Desmond's first year at the new firm. She picked up her glass. Reggie and Yolanda settled into their chairs, and the kitchen filled with the warm, unhurried sound of people who had earned the right to sit exactly where they were. Denise raised her glass. She smiled. Not for anyone in the room. Just for herself. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you